Hello, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of our continuing series on generative AI and automation. Today, we've got a very special panel. I'm super excited to have some industry stalwarts here to share their insights and insights into their conversations on where in the world the industry is going, what their customers are doing and saying about intelligent automation and putting generative AI to work, and how to do it yourself. As always, I am joined by my dear friend, Micah Smith. Micah, how are you?
Hey, I'm happy to be here. Excited to have this conversation. We've got some really interesting guests, and I'm excited to hear their insights, and I'm taking notes for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a precursor to the industry's premier intelligent automation event, Imagine, which is coming up in just a couple weeks. I can't wait to see all these folks there as well. What we wanted to do is give you guys, the audience, and thank you for joining as usual, a little insider view to what's going to be discussed and happening at Imagine. Each of these folks here is a platinum sponsor, and we're grateful for that. They will have sessions at Imagine that you can join and interact and ask your questions one-to-one, see all the cool things. So we're super excited to get to Austin in a couple of weeks. But before we do, we thought we'd bring this illustrious group in to have a little conversation. So without further ado, let me introduce the panel. So first of all, I'm extremely happy to introduce you all to Jagjit Dhaliwal from AWS. Jagjit, welcome.
Gabriel, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me here. And we at AWS also is pretty excited about our partnership with Automation Anywhere. Just to do the introduction for the attendees, I lead the go-to-market and co-sell strategy with our intelligent automation ISV partners. And I engage with these ISV partners, assisting them with their build, market, and sell motions. And Automation Anywhere is our key strategy partner in the intelligent automation space, especially in developing a Gen AI joint solutions together. So I'm really excited and looking forward to the conversation.
That's amazing. I'm sure there's going to be a ton of questions. You guys are doing amazing things, so we're excited to learn more about that. We also have Mona Dash from Infosys. Mona, welcome.
Hello. Thanks for having me here. And as a quick introduction, I basically manage the AI and automation sales and partner relationships for the European region. I work quite closely actually with your counterparts in the European office from Automation Anywhere. We have quite a few customers together, and we've also got some great plans for them.
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much for making the time. It's awesome to have the global perspective as well. Super excited to have you here. So thank you. We also have Suranjan Pramanik from CIT. Suranjan, thank you very much for joining us. How are you?
I am well, Gabe. Thank you for having me here. And as you said, my name is Suranjan. I'm with Sage IT. I'm the president of the services business. Been with Sage for most part of this year, early January onwards. And for those of you who do not know Sage, we enable companies become composable, hyper and intelligently automated, scalable, and data insight driven using the cloud. And we've been in existence for over 20 years, based out of our lovely headquarters in Frisco, a suburb of Dallas. And glad to be here, Gabe. Once again, thank you for...
Yeah, and thank you for joining us. Mm-hmm. And thank you. I know you're on vacation right now, so I appreciate you taking time out for this. This is super cool.
Sure.
And the fourth illustrious member of our panel today, Prasanna Ramaswamy from Recode. Prasanna, how are you?
I'm very good, Gabe. Thanks for the opportunity, and glad to be talking to all of you. I'm the co-founder of Recode Solutions. We are not just a platinum sponsor of this year's Imagine, we are a platinum partner of Automation Anywhere. Glad to be talking to you again. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, it's super excited to have you, and thanks again. For the audience's context, I've been able to have some pre-call briefings and meet the panel discussing different things. Like I said, we're going to have more conversations at Imagine that we're excited about as well. But during that, with each of our panel members, so many cool topics, so many cool insights, and really sort of practical, the questions and the challenges that people are facing around generative AI particularly, but then also sort of the really cool opportunities around intelligent automation and what they're doing with the Automation Success platform to really put generative AI to work. So it's not just another app, right? And it's not just a cool new toy. Like, this is something that we're able to actually start to really transform with, which has been the gist of our conversations to this point. Now we're seeing sort of the rubber hit the road, and I think it's super cool. So with that said, let's dive into the topic. So we have this approach at Automation Anywhere where we sort of break out, and Micah, you're well versed in this, right? With the Pathfinder, where we talk about the phases of your automation program, your automation journey. They're starting, there's accelerating, and they're scaling. So for the purpose of this conversation, we kind of wanted to model the conversation based on those tenets or those different phases. So let's talk about starting. And in this case, I want to talk about starting or adding generative AI to your intelligent automation journey. I think that we've all seen the news. We all think it's cool. I'm sure, and you guys can attest to this and speak to it, that, probably every one of your customers and prospects is asking about, what can I do with Gen AI and automation? In the Now Next report that we recently published, 45% of respondents said that they're actively deploying generative AI or plan to in the next 6 months. I want to start with, let me ask you, Suranjan, what kind of questions are you getting from clients with regards to getting started with intelligent automation and generative AI?
Thanks, Gabe. That's a very interesting start to this whole discussion. And so what you said, that a lot of people are reading about Gen AI, ChatGPT, and all the miracles that it can do. I have a customer I was speaking with last week who said, my CEO came back over the weekend, and on Monday I had a heap of articles that he forwarded to me. Are we doing this? Are we doing this? Are we doing this? Right? So that's what some of our customers are dealing with all the media buzz around this new technology and these new capabilities. They're being pushed by their C-level on what are we doing, right? But coming back to your question, our customers, we have customers at different stages of the begin, scale, accelerate spectrum of automation, right? And so you can imagine that customers who are at these different stages have different things that they're dealing with and different questions that they are getting around becoming more intelligent in their automation usage, as well as on using generative AI. And as we all know, there is a convergence over the years that's happening. And while automation started out being largely automating tasks and simpler activities over the years, it's become more complex, and processes are being automated and more intelligence is being built into them. So the questions that we are getting from our customers, if I categorize them, the first one I addressed in terms of C-level business unit leaders read about something, come back from a conference and ask the automation leader, hey, what are we doing on our generative AI? What are we doing in intelligent automation? How do we become more adaptive and more intelligent, right? That's one category. The second category is around enterprises have AI programs and automation programs which kind of have evolved and are run in a somewhat siloed, unintegrated manner. So the question is, how do we bring these things together? How do we make our AI and ML and other programs and the technologies integrate and come together with our automation journeys and roadmaps, right? And the third area is now our TA platforms have their own Gen AI capabilities. There are use cases, Gen AI capability use cases, which the automation platforms have out of the box, right? So what are they and how can we leverage them in our businesses? So I would say, in a nutshell, those are the kind of questions we get from our customers across the spectrum of big and scalar automation and acceleration, and we are constantly engaging with them to help them understand and educate them on how to automate today for an intelligent tomorrow. And we leverage our Automation Next platform, which is we've been empowered with generative AI use cases to help them understand and drive their business better.
That's cool. I think it's really interesting the actual aspect of like, hey, there's an AI team and there's an automation team and there's a business. I think that's really interesting. I think we'll dive into that in a bit. I think when we talk about change management and some other things, I think that's a really interesting point in conversation to be had as well.
I think the education that you mentioned is also really important because people hear about these things and they might see some flashy marketing video, but the education of what's realistic and what's possible and what's safe is really important as you implement some of these things.
Exactly.
Mona,
that's what the customer that I referred to came to us and said, "What do I tell my CEO? What out of these is really doable in our business?" Right. So
that's right.
It is a big challenge for them.
Mona, I want to bring you into this. If you're advising someone who is getting started with Gen AI and automation, what are the 3 things on the checklist that you're going to go over with them as they start to consider rolling these capabilities out?
Yeah, sure. So before going on to the checklist, I'd just like to talk a little bit about how at Infosys we see this, and we've been sort of at the kind of forefront at within PAS and what we have called as our Infosys Generative AI Labs, where we follow something called the 3 R's, and it's basically reimagine, redefine, and reinforce. So it's kind of about reimagining the sort of digital enterprise with ready-to-use industry solutions and how you kind of actually embed generative AI into enterprise systems and applications, pretty much like how it was with the automation as well. And redefine, meaning how do you redefine human capability and empower people so that you basically, because at Infosys we believe that humans spot problems while machines solve them. So how do we kind of empower more people and amplify people? And then, of course, reinforcing AI ethics and using sort of responsible design frameworks. So these are the sort of the 3 R's. And the reason I'm saying that is it kind of connects to some of the questions, I think, which Suranjan was also mentioning, and what we hear from our customers. So I think the checklist, I would say, is probably to be very, the test checklist on the ground would probably be to first decide on the actual use cases and why you want to use generative AI for it, because it often could be something which is literally being done by, automation or intelligent automation or just ML technology. So I think it's to be sure about the use case, talk to the SI or the consultant to understand which are the best large language models to be using. And then, of course, I think it's also a lot about communications, because many of our customers are very large enterprises and they have, everybody's working in silos. So they might have one business unit who sort of started off with experimenting with some POCs and some others who don't know about it. So I think organizations do also need to sort of centralize a little more of the communication. So yeah, that's the base top 3 checklist, I'd say.
That's great. I love the alliteration. Always a fan of the 3 R's. We have the 5 P's for the Pathfinder program, and it helps for those things to be much more memorable. Jagjit, I think you represent a bit of a different perspective, not coming from a solution provider, but coming more from a product side. How do you think about someone getting started, and what are the top 3 things you're gonna ask them and tips you're going to give?
Sure, Gabriel. I actually definitely agree with Mona and Suranjan. They definitely brought the right points as someone who is starting their journey. They should be thinking about that why they are doing it and what use case they want to implement. And I do want to add one point to that. Being an advocate of emerging technologies for many years throughout my journey, it's extremely important to even figure out what the success looks like as you are embarking the journey, because there is always a difference of opinion in terms of the outcomes. So linking it back to what business outcome you want, and from a top-down perspective and from a bottom-up, which use case going to help you achieve it, and setting the right expectation with the business teams. What does success means to it? Because there is a lot of gaps when it comes to the AI initiatives where business may expect a lot, whereas your initial accuracy and results may not meet that expectation, and that may create a lot of conflicts. But having said that, from a business side, typically the customers who are reaching out to AWS, if I have to give you a 3-point checklist, the very first question we get is how to start the generative AI journey. And what I mean by that is we have so many foundation models within AWS as well as the publicly available FMs. Which model will fit best for our needs, which can give us a result best suited for our purpose. So that's the first guidance they look for. Then the second area they look for is we have a complex ecosystem with a lot of legacy and modern applications. How are these generative AI solutions going to integrate into those applications to give us a seamless experience and without causing a huge cluster of a new infrastructure or a new cost? So how it's going to fit well into my existing enterprise architecture. That's the second area we get in. And third, and the most important area which we get a lot of questions is about the data. So they always want to hear that how it is easier to take the base foundation model and build the applications using their own data, and whether my data will be secured and private during this process, and how I can control my data, what's being shared with it to the foundation model, and what's going out and what's I'm controlling. So a lot of questions typically come on the data, and that's something which happy to touch upon in the later part of the conversation. So those are the 3 areas I would highlight.
It's all super good stuff. Prasanna, you want to weigh in here?
No, definitely. And first of all, I concur with whatever has been told so far. One is, one of the main, to make the rubber meet the road in terms of how enterprises can leverage generative AI is to have a common understanding of what Gen AI is. I think that education is something very, very important. So if you look at the evolution of, and I've been watching this automation space for the last 10, 12 years, and if you look at the evolution of this automation, I think Suranjan spoke about the low-level task automation and where we are now. It has become from formative to decisive to creative. That's where Gen AI has come in, right? The next generation of automation, if you will, intelligent automation. So an automation engine, by being just a mere executor, then it became a decision maker. Now it has become a creator, right? While it is still abstract, people are still sort of trying to grasp around in terms of what that exactly means for me, right? How do I bring this into the enterprise? Everybody is talking about this. I don't want to miss the bus. I want to definitely leverage, but I don't know where to use it. Is there a bang for the buck to leverage something like this? Of course, there are other concerns about data privacy and security and whatnot. Sure. So I think the in terms of the understanding of what this concept is, right? It is very, very important that everybody has a common and standard understanding of what Gen AI means and what Gen AI means in their particular context. I think that is very, very important.
Great point. All great points around sort of getting started and sort of setting those baselines and asking the right questions, so that then once you sort of get to the deployment side, you're setting yourself up for success. I know it sounds like common knowledge, but at the same time, we, especially with something like this, technology in particular, like generative AI, that's moving so quickly. I think people can probably, I'm sure you guys see it, right? People get super excited, myself included. I'm like, hey, we can do all these things, right? And then we get halfway down. I'm like, oh, well, you know what? That's actually not what I wanted to solve. And it doesn't scale or whatever. So to that end, I have a question about, as we move sort of towards, beyond those sort of baseline starting parameters that you guys just mentioned. And by the way, I encourage the audience to engage with our guests to get more insights, in particular on getting started, with the important questions to ask, the expectations to set, all super important. But as we move into sort of this idea, let's pretend that we've established those and we want to accelerate now. I mentioned the Now and Next report a moment ago, and I thought one of the other interesting data points that came out of it was a whopping 88% of the respondents said AI is critical to successfully scaling business process automation and effectively having true end-to-end transformation. But to get there, you've got to, as you mentioned, move sort of out of task automation, make sure that we're sort of reducing the silos. But I had this conversation recently with a friend who's not in tech, who I turned on to ChatGPT. She's a marketer for a small construction company, and caught up with her after she's been using it for about four weeks or so. And oh my God, it's completely changed my work. It's amazing. It's so helpful. It's so useful. All these things. She's like, I need to take it to the next level. And I thought, well, you can do more with more sort of evolved prompts and different things like that. But I also said, look at the process that you're doing just on an individual level, because effectively all you've done is introduce a new app to your workflow that you're still sort of cutting and pasting results from and data from and view, et cetera. So that's a very simple, personal story that probably many people actually, you take back and look, even myself, if you sort of look at it, you're like, okay, yeah, there's a new app that's helpful. But in terms of like sort of optimizing the process, I haven't done a ton to move that needle, if you will. My question is, how can we leverage generative AI and automation to connect and accelerate the business instead of just having sort of another, and somebody touched on this earlier, is having it sort of another siloed function, if you will, or piece of technology. Prasanna, you kind of started to speak to it a little bit. How can we bridge these gaps using generative AI and automation?
Yes, that's a good question. In fact, the way we look at the use cases where we will be able to leverage AI is how, to your point, how do you accelerate the automation journey itself, right? How do you make some of those use cases, automation use cases, possible, which was not possible before the advent of Gen AI, right? And there are several use cases that are popping up, right? And I was in New York yesterday meeting with a Fortune company executives, and they had the same question in terms of, okay, right, this is fine, we care about this. There are POCs happening everywhere. But okay, what do we do? Where does it fit in? Where does it apply to us? What is the business? Where is the business case? What is the return on investment? So there are so many questions that they have. Now, my pitch to them is about identify some low-hanging fruits, right? Because this is still early days when it comes to enterprising, or what I call institutionalizing Gen AI, right? There is a lot of buzz, but there is concern as well. So people are sort of treading cautiously. Again, there's a lot of intent to do it, but they don't know where exactly to do it. So there's a lot of confusions, if you will. So in terms of, there are some low-hanging fruits. For example, one of our customers who are in the home construction, they want to leverage Gen AI to create marketing content in their listing, right? In their home listing, right? Instead of somebody going and typing about the house and whatnot, they are leveraging Gen AI and we're helping them with that. They are just to look at the images of the property, look at the location of the property from Google Maps or whatnot, look at what are the school districts that are going on, put everything together and create a marketing content that is much better than what a human will do. Okay? And it is standard, it is consistent also, because every salesperson will have his or her own style of creating their content. They want to make sure that they are able to not only eliminate human involvement in creating the content, but also to improve the quality of the content. Right? Similarly, another low-hanging fruit that I can very easily think of is this is for another Fortune 100 company. For their shared services, they get millions of tickets in their finance department, okay, through ServiceNow, okay? And if there's million plus, you can imagine the backlog that they will have, right? 80 to 90% of those incidents, the solutions are cookie cutters. But it still takes a human to go and then resolve each and every ticket. So in the past, if you have automated that, an automation or a bot will be able to parse through it, understand what it is, and probably send it to the right person to resolve. Now they're talking about how do I take GenAI and auto-resolve 90% of the tickets, because I know exactly what needs to be done. And even if a resolution is different, the associate should be able to teach the LLM, hey, this is the new thing, this is what I have done, so that the GenAI engine should be able to train itself and do the resolution by itself from tomorrow. So there's so many opportunities. And another one that I can, on the top of my head is from a legal document perspective, right? Extracting, I was in a very interesting situation at a grocery retailer in the East Coast. They were having a pretty hostile termination negotiation with one of their software vendors. Okay. And very dated contract. They didn't know what the fine prints are. Very, very difficult, 300-page document. And every time they were going to the vendor was throwing something at them. So there, if they want to learn from this, they want to pass through, using GenAI, they want to pass through all the legal contracts that they have and extract all the critical things into a actionable, visible database, right?
Right.
So that, if this is a vendor, these are my standard clauses, these are my gotchas, these are my risks, and what should be my mitigation. So rather than being reactive, how do you use generative AI to create some solution and be much more proactive in solving your business problem? So to cut it short, to accelerate automation journey. In fact, when I say accelerate, there are two dimensions to it. One is to how do you speed this up, but also how do you make some of those automations which are not possible earlier, how do you make them possible today? So it is about identifying those use cases which are low-hanging fruits, which have massive return on investment, and you use those opportunities to learn how to institutionalize a LLM model in an enterprise, take care of all the privacy and any other concern that they might have.
I think nobody cares about us marketing people. No, I'm just kidding. We're obviously using Gen AI. Like I said, I think the key is using the integrated approach, though, where, for instance, like the customer service, the contact center that you mentioned, right? We've got with Automation Copilot being able to be embedded in, Salesforce or Genesis or managing ServiceNow tickets, whatever it might be. Not only generate the content, but then move the content and move the data amongst the different systems. I think is sort of the key, right? I think the legal one's really interesting because both of those, if you think about just those two, just the amount of dollars in terms of risk or in terms of keeping a happy customer, et cetera, it's really, really cool use cases and stuff that we were already deploying to the customers. Michael, on Pathfinder, your doors and stuff, have you talked to customers about some of these applications or use cases?
Yeah, I think one that is coming up quite a bit that we hear about that I think a lot of people can relate to is especially around customer support kind of issues, like Prasanna mentioned. As a software company, we have customer support, right? People contact us and say, hey, this thing isn't working, or I need help understanding this one thing. So I thought that use case that he mentioned was really interesting. And I'd like to ask Jagjit, as far as AWS is concerned, right? I know you mentioned that you have these foundation models. How would you advise a customer who says, look, I've got all these support tickets. Obviously, Prasanna mentioned that there's a huge backlog. Our team can't take care of them as quickly as we would like. What are some ways that we could be using some of this AWS capabilities to, train models or be able to fine tune them based on our, backlog of KB articles or previously answered tickets or things like that, to really, kind of create that first layer of defense of being able to automate the responses to customer support queries?
Absolutely, Mika, and great question. And as you know that Amazon is very customer-centric. And Prasanna, I was loving the examples you were giving, the real examples from customers as they're embarking the journey. And we apply the same mindset. We always look from a customer perspective, and that is why we are not enforcing a one particular foundation model. And it is all about how we can democratize the access to the foundation models. And precisely to the reason for that, and with keeping a choice and flexibility to the customer, we enable our solutions. So I'll actually give the 4 categories of solutions which we have within AWS. The very first one is the Amazon Bedrock, which we announced in April of this year. That is the easiest way for customers to build and scale the generative AI-based applications using a multitude of foundation models. We have our own foundation models, as well as all the leading AI startups, including AI21, Anthropic, Cohere, Stability AI. So all these models you can access through APIs. So the customer doesn't need to worry about the infrastructure and the lower tiers, and they can consume these models directly via API. So this is perfect for the customers who are embarking journey. They may not be matured in terms of managing the FM models themselves. Then the second category of solution we have is if the customer is matured and they want to develop their own FM models, that is where Amazon SageMaker Jumpstart comes in, which is our machine learning hub, which offers the algorithms, models, and the whole ML solutions lifecycle. So you actually can develop your FM models there. Then the third category is actually developing a generative AI applications for a vertical and a horizontal use cases, which customers can consume directly. I want to call out 2 examples there. One of them is actually a Code Whisperer, which is our AI coding companion, in which the developers actually can use Coder Companion to fast track their coding development activities. And then if I have to give the example of an industry-specific solution, we are offering the AWS Health Scribe, which actually helps the healthcare software vendors create the application that reduce the burden of a clinical documentation using speech recognition and generative AI. So imagine the physicians and clinicians, they spend like enormous time documenting all those notes and then summarizing it and then putting it into the EHR systems. So this is a perfect use case where you actually can use the AWS Health Scribe solution. And last but not least, for a very mature enterprise customers who wants to even control the infrastructure also, we have been investing in our own silicon to push the envelope there, and our own AWS Trainium and Inferentia chip that can actually bring the very lowest cost if we have to train the models and run the inferences on the cloud. So those are the 4 category of areas which we are offering to our customers, and our whole approach is that how we can give the choice and flexibility to the customer based on their maturity of the journey. So, and they are not feeling bound by like a one particular model being offered otherwise. So those are some of the thoughts. Happy to give more examples.
Yeah, well, we can dive into those too when we get to Imagine. We'll have that content. But I also want to remind the audience, this is a participatory environment. So if you have a question that you would like to ask the panel, please, you can raise your hand and we'll bring you into the show. It looks like Avi has his hand raised. Jorge, our producer, can you bring Avi in? Oh, looks like Avi just dropped. All right, well, like I said, for our audience.
He did that on purpose. I think.
He wanted to set me up. I feel like there's some plants in the audience or something just trying to set me up every time, but that's all right. So quick question, Mona. With regards to, we sort of like zeroed in on like customer service and stuff, but with your customers, where are you seeing, are you talking a lot about customer service, right? In customer support applications with regards to intelligent automation? Or what kind of conversations are you having?
Yeah, sure. I think, customer experience and customer support, I think it's, it was always one of the things which, use cases or like in the contact center automation, for example, that was always present as it has been a few years ever since automation and attended automation came into the space. So those were always popular. But I think with generative AI, that's definitely gone, that there's a huge interest. I think the main use cases we see, from generative AI perspective is a lot around code, a lot around, the whole SDLC space. That's one really big area. But the next one probably is the customer experience or even employee experience. So how do you kind of use some of the capability which, large language models brings to us, generative AI brings, like the whole semantic search, to just name one. Those kind of capabilities, and how do you use it to enhance customer experience, like the whole ChatGPT kind of interface, or just doing more intelligent search and more contextual search. So yes, definitely. That's something which a lot of our customers are asking for.
Awesome. And we do have a new question from the audience. Ed, how are you? Let's get you in here. Jorge, can you let Ed ask his question? Well, there he is. Ed, I think you're on mute. And just to show that we're all into this together, Ed, I think you're from SS&C, right? Ed, you're on mute.
I think do you have to unmute him?
Yeah, he's showing on mute.
It's like Ed might have some audio problems. All right, well, Ed, we'll come back to you if we can get your microphone working. Well, let's move on. Let's move the conversation forward a little bit. Man, time's flying already. I've got like 37 more things I want to ask you guys, but I hope we'll get to them. So we talked a little bit about this sort of acceleration of deployment, and we talked about some of these new use cases and new, like the customer support function using generative AI and intelligent automation. But let's talk a little bit about the concept of scale. Again, I'll go back to the Now and Next report as a point of reference, and there's any number of other reports that come out recently reporting this as well. But this idea of being able to scale across the enterprise, we mentioned sort of the end-to-end transformation goal earlier. The fact that the CEOs and C-suite are coming in and dropping this list of like, hey, we're doing this, are we doing that? We found that the buying committee and decision making has elevated from function to the C-suite, and I think it shows and underscores the importance in this imperative to transform leveraging intelligent automation. One of the other pieces of data that came through was the need to empower citizen development to be able to scale. Mona, let me start with you. How are your customers and clients? How are you advising customers and clients to train and become fluent in the application, and even being self-empowered to develop automations leveraging Gen AI?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, I think this is something which is of huge interest. This whole idea of citizen development or sort of doing this, because obviously when thanks to ChatGPT and when it all became viral, and because of the fact that it's actually democratized AI significantly, and everybody has and is So it's been so much easy to use. So everybody now wants to do something in that space. Whereas obviously from an automation point of view, I think citizen development was something which I know vendors like yourselves and others have had for a few years. So yeah, I think we see a lot of interest, and as I just mentioned before, especially in the area of the code space, when you can actually have your own developers use tools which are available thanks to sort of LLM-based tools, which again a lot of vendors or SIs are providing. Within Infosys, we have our own approach as well to see how to empower developers using kind of like Copilot-like tools or code assistant kind of tools. So yes, there is a huge interest, but also then the challenge, of course, is, which I guess you're going to come to as well, is how do you scale that and how do you take it at an enterprise level using the same sort of governance and design principles.
Yeah, it seems to be it's definitely a need. It's I think based on the data that we're seeing, there's a demand. I think the practical piece of designing the system to be able to empower, right? And Micah, maybe you can speak to it as well from the Pathfinder perspective, because you're out there, pounding the street and having real conversations and helping folks to build these programs, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely encouraging customers to explore what can be done with citizen development, and it's definitely a lever for scale for organizations who are looking to grow. I think that the one thing that we always make sure to stress with customers is that you need to have, and it's appropriate we're talking about this in the scale phase, because you want to have kind of the program operations set up in a way, and your production and development standards set up in a way that you can start to enable users to contribute to your automation program. If you start citizen development from day one, it can sometimes be challenging because you've got maybe not the best standards set up for everyone, and you're going to be stuck doing a lot of code reviews of low quality code and not standards and guidance to give them on best practices. So we always encourage people to have that firm foundation as they start to introduce citizen development, and that can help it to go much more smoothly. So yeah, that's definitely a big key that we cover with organizations as they continue to grow and scale.
And I know, Micah, you're a truist. You're not a shameless plugger like me, but I will say that with the Pathfinder program, there is effectively a playbook, right, to follow so that you can overcome those challenges that you mentioned, and expedite a citizen development program and or scale, accelerate, et cetera. It looks like this topic has lit up the audience a little bit too. So let's jump into some questions if you can't bring somebody in, and hopefully we have our audio issues fixed. So is it Mahabir? Can we bring Mahabir in? Mahabir, welcome to the show. How are you?
Doing good. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thanks for calling.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Cool. Yes, this is a very interesting topic. I have a quick question. This is related to scalable solution. At the same time, a little bit towards the analytics, quite a mixed match. So I'm just thinking about analytics to insight as a scalable solution with the automation in mind. At the same time, using the generative AI. I belong to a retail background, more about CPG, consumer products. I'm just thinking about, is that anything anybody has, or from the speaker panel, I just need to know, do you have any use cases? Is that topic, do you think that is emerging in the future, or anything is happening on that one? Just need to know some thought process over that.
I can answer if you want, if you're okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so Mike, thanks for asking. In fact, it's pretty fresh in my mind. This was something that was discussed yesterday with one of my customers. For their, you have retail background, so as I, and they have all these, in the data, you have a lot of dashboards, right, which are throwing data. People have to go and then check. It gives you a health check and whatnot. But where this use case that we are sort of piloting with this particular customer is to create a layer on top of it, where instead of a business user logging into the dashboard, going through each and every metric to find out what is right, what is wrong, he should be able to leverage sort of a Q&A, like how you will interact with the chat GPT, if you will, saying that, okay, which are my slow moving items, right? And then it is able to pass through the dashboard, pass through your data, and then come up with the information. So that's one use case that we spoke about yesterday from a data analytics perspective.
Thanks for addressing that. Let's bring in another. I like to call them callers because I'm old and I'm used to old radio shows and whatnot. But is Adrienne available? Can we bring Adrienne to ask her question? And by the way, for the previous question, I think the analytics piece, one of the things that we'll get to is hopefully is the just the concept of all the data that's out there and what Gen AI can do to, and automation, intelligent automation in particular, can access the data, make sense of it, right, and get it to you quickly because we need this. We need the data to make good decisions. We also need to have good data, right, which I think is something that everyone needs to be cognizant of as well, right? Because if you're, it's garbage in, garbage out kind of thing too, right? We won't be leveraging.
Again, if you don't mind, while we wait for Adrian, I can add to the scale point that you raised earlier, and to some extent the question that was raised as well. Is it okay?
Yeah, please.
I don't know if Adrian, you've been able to pull her in yet.
Yeah, it looks like there's an issue there. So, Adrian, we're trying to get to you, but hold tight. But yeah, please, please.
Yeah. So on the point of scaling, and one of the simple questions that we look at is, and our customers are trying to grapple with, is as they're trying to scale, is ROI, right? And while there are different surveys, different reports of the number of customers who have deployed automation and what stage they are in, there is a fact that many customers are struggling to get realize the ROI that they had designed their programs for, right? And that's where the issue of scaling comes in, because when enterprises look at implementing technology for the sake of technology, the returns very rarely show up. So where we try to leverage our Automation Next platform and advise our clients in leveraging technologies is start with the problem that you're trying to solve. And we help them figure out those problems. We help them figure out, okay, if customer experience improvement is your requirement, let's look beyond contact center automation, for example, because contact center automation, we all know, and I'm a recipient of contact center automation customer experience, so to speak, and we all know how long we have to wait online despite automation of the contact center that have happened over the years. And we all know how unintegrated in some cases the chat, email, voice, all of those channels of contact with our enterprises, right? So our advice to our customers is, if customer experience improvement is your requirement and your need, let us look at the entire process. Let us look at what does it mean to drive improvement for your customers. Let's get some of your customers into the focus and understand what good experience means to them. And then look at what kind of technologies can help solve the problem. And it could be a combination, right? We try to bring a combination of things where an automation platform, in some cases, is one of the pillars of the solution that helps solve that problem. AI is definitely, in today's world, one cannot have a solution without some form or the other of AI in it. There are in some physical, for example, field service solutions, AR/VR solutions are part of the solution. So I think how we look at it is a process transformation to drive enablement of that solution to that problem, and then bring in technology components which help solve that problem. So to the point of scaling, that's what we try to look at. That as you're trying to figure out how do you take your automation program and make it enterprise-wide, let's look at which problems are you trying to solve and where automation plus different technologies can help you solve those problems. Yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting too, as you sort of zoom out to sort of the problem statement versus like sort of a process statement or you're addressing is the dependencies across potentially like various functions, for instance, to solve that problem in customer support or, whatever it might be. And having that holistic view clearly is the right approach, right? It looks like we have Adrian in the room to ask her question. Adrian, how are you? Thank you for joining.
How are you, Gabriel?
I'm doing well, thanks.
Great. So I was just curious if you are all seeing a slight uptick in risk-averse kind of area between security, cloud, and even development teams, and how you're addressing that with scalability.
Gavin, do you want me to take it up?
Yeah, sure.
Vision, thanks for bringing it up. Actually, that's the key concern which we hear from our customers. And data and security are the two key pillars which are core to AWS services. And we want to make sure that we continue to raise the bar with the generative AI solutions. So one of the concerns which we typically hear is that how we are protecting the customer data. So the key approach to that is all the services which we are offering from AWS, like we extend the same data privacy principles which we all have on existing AWS services. So within that, customer control their data and they determine who can access their data. And they control that where that data will be stored based on a specific need. And one of the key things which you will see with the foundation model is none of the customer data is used to train the original base model. So you get the base model, which is trained using a public data sets. Then you bring it into your tenant, and then you fine tune it using your data in your private tenant. So you're not exposing your data to the outside world, and that data is not passed back to fine tune and further enhance the models. So that's from a data perspective that how all typically the foundation models are ensuring data privacy. And then when it comes to the security controls, it's all about that how data is being used and transit through the process. So all the data which is going on between, if you're using a S3, let's say in case of Amazon, so the transit which is happening, it's encrypted at rest using the Amazon key services, which provides you the full control there, as well as if the data is going from S3 to your environment using the private link, as well as the other encryption mechanisms, you will have a full control on what security principles you need to apply. Then lastly, if you are pretty matured customer where you are actually looking at an infrastructure layer also, all the AWS services and infrastructure, as we all probably be knowing that, like we have a deep data set of 300 plus cloud security tools and the trust based on all the security standards and compliance certifications, like the PCI, HIPAA, FedRAMP, GDPR, and so on. So all those are already there, which is extended to the Bedrock services too. So these are some of the ways we are ensuring that all the data and security principles which we have been building our foundation on, we continue to extend to the generative AI solutions.
Thanks for that, Jagjit. As we well know, and again, going back to the shameless plug of the next report, security and privacy was the number one barrier for organizations in key concern, right? And Again, that's nothing new, but I think, to your point, with the way AWS is building out and leveraging your existing approaches and offering, the industry-specific type of models and whatnot, I think what I've seen and garnered is that those will overcome all the challenges.
If it is okay, one more point I want to call out. I know we may be running out of time, but goes back to the organizations which are implementing Gen AI, and I'm sure my colleagues will fully agree with that, because the product or solutions can give you a certain level of attestation on the data and security, but end of the day, it's a very shared responsibility. And we already know the challenges of typical AI solutions, and I'm a big proponent of a responsible AI. And that responsible AI tenants, or I would say the risk, have added more dimensions from Gen AI perspective. It's not just the fairness, explainability, and privacy aspects. Now we are seeing the intellectual property, hallucination, the toxicity, plagiarism. So all these new dimensions which are coming in, which we can always control up to a certain point, but end of the day, how those solutions are integrated into your environment. And that's where the shared responsibilities comes into picture, which you as a customer need to think through that, ensure that you have that AI maturity and you have a human-centric approach while you are adapting these solutions.
That's a great way to get us to the end of our show here. We're already out of time. Like I said, this flew by, but human at the center, human-centric approach, holistic point of view, I think you all support that. And I encourage our audience, I apologize to those that wanted to ask their questions. We don't have time to get to your questions today, but I encourage you to reach out to us on the panel. You can reach out to me and I can put you in contact with the right folks, hopefully to address your questions, but also I encourage you to connect with our panelists here today. I want to say thank you to each of you for taking the time to join our little show and share your insights. I really look forward to diving into even deeper these conversations at Imagine. For those of you that haven't registered for Imagine, do it. Get to Austin. It's unlike any experience you've ever had. Thanks again. Like I said, time flew. We've got so much more to discuss, and we could go on for days. Maybe we can do this again. Panel, what do you guys think?
Sure. No, Gabe, this has been great. Definitely look forward to, if you want to do it again, one more of it, we can try and do it, but look forward to meeting everybody at Imagine in a couple of weeks. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Suranjan.
Enjoy Imagine. So have a good one.
Thanks, Bada. Well, I hope to see you in London soon.
Yes, sure. Yeah. Well, we'll be there. I mean, my colleagues will be there for Imagine. So, yeah.
All right, we'll do a selfie for you and send it over.
Yes.
Thanks, Gabe and Micah. See you guys in Imagine.
Thanks.